The rain pelted against the window as Margaret sat alone in the dimly lit cafe. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but she barely noticed. Her hands trembled as she stirred her tea absent-mindedly. She was waiting for him. Walter. A name that once meant nothing to her, but now sent shivers down her spine. Margaret had been married to Samuel for 16 years. Their life was stable, predictable even, but in the last few years, something had changed. The love that once burned brightly had dulled into routine conversations, distant gazes, and empty goodnights. Margaret had tried to ignore it, had convinced herself that marriage was not about passion but companionship. Until Walter entered her life. Walter had been married to Ruth for over 2 decades. A respectable businessman, charming and confident. But beneath his polished exterior lay a man searching for something more, something he no longer found in his own marriage. They had met at a charity event, an innocent introduction that quickly spiraled into something far more dangerous. Their conversations became longer, their laughter a little too sincere. The way he looked at her, intently, as if she were the most fascinating woman in the world, made Margaret feel alive again. At first, it had been subtle. A lingering touch. A whispered joke. A meeting that lasted longer than it should have. But soon, it became undeniable. The late-night calls, the secret messages, the stolen moments that turned into passionate rendezvous. Margaret knew she was walking on fragile ground, but the way Walter made her feel was intoxicating. With him, she wasn't just a wife or a mother. She was a woman, desired and adored. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and theirs was no exception. One evening, Samuel sat in his study, going through old photographs. Pictures of their wedding day, their children, their life together. Something inside him stirred. He had noticed Margaret's distance, the way she barely looked at him anymore, how she always seemed lost in thought. The doubts had been creeping in for months, but it wasn't until he accidentally saw a text message flash across her phone that his suspicions solidified into something undeniable. His heart pounded as he stared at the words. His world tilted, and he felt like the ground beneath him had given way. He had always trusted her. Had he been blind all along? Ruth, too, had her suspicions. Walter had been more distant than usual, distracted even when he was home. He often worked late, his phone constantly buzzing with messages he never shared. She had tried to ignore it, but the whispers of doubt gnawed at her. One night, driven by an unbearable sense of foreboding, she followed him. And what she saw shattered her. Walter and Margaret, standing in the dimly lit park, wrapped in an embrace so intimate that it left no room for doubt. Ruth watched, her breath hitching, her hands shaking. The betrayal clawed at her chest, a searing pain that nearly brought her to her knees. Samuel confronted Margaret that night. "Who is he?" His voice was low, but the fury in his eyes was unmistakable. Margaret froze, her mind racing. Don't lie to me, Margaret. I saw the message." His voice broke, and that shattered her more than anything else. Tears welled in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you, Samuel. I was lonely. I felt invisible. And Walter, he saw me." "I saw you too," Samuel whispered. "You just stopped looking at me." Meanwhile, Ruth stood in front of Walter, her face pale, her hands trembling. "How long?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. Walter couldn't meet her gaze. "Ruth, I never wanted to hurt you. And yet you did." Her voice cracked. "You shattered everything we built. For what?" "For a few stolen moments." He reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't you dare touch me. I deserved better than this." Divorce papers were filed. Hearts were broken beyond repair. Margaret and Walter, once intoxicated by their forbidden love, found that their affair had not led to the happiness they had imagined. Instead, it left destruction in its wake. Their passion had burned too hot, too fast, leaving only ashes behind. Samuel found solace in rebuilding his life, focusing on his children, and slowly mending the wounds left by betrayal. Ruth, though devastated, refused to let Walter's choices define her. She rediscovered herself, pursued the passions she had long neglected, and found a strength she never knew she had. And as for Margaret and Walter, they tried to make it work. But what was once exhilarating in secrecy turned sour in reality. Without the thrill of the chase, their relationship lost its luster. What they thought was love had been nothing more than an illusion. One day, as Margaret sat in the same cafe where it all began, she realized the truth. She had not just lost her marriage. She had lost herself. Infidelity is often painted as passionate, but beneath its surface lies heartbreak, deception, and regret. This is not a story of romance, but a cautionary tale, a reminder that love built on betrayal rarely stands the test of time. And in the end, the affair that broke 2 marriages left 4 people struggling to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives.